Hello and a very warm welcome to Life Under Destruction, Building Blocks for a New Gaza. This is a special edition of Deutsche Welle's Conflict Zone coming to you from the Munich Security Conference. I'm Sarah Kelly. We are joined by the Foreign Minister of the Palestinian Authority, Farzin Agabekian-Shahin. Welcome to you. The High Representative for Gaza, Nikolai Mladenov. Welcome. Foreign Minister of Spain, Jose Manuel Álvarez Bueno. Welcome. Diplomatic Advisor to the President of the UAE, Anwar Mohammed Gargash, and U.S. Democratic Senator Chris Murphy. Thank you so much to all of you for being here. There's a vision for a new Gaza. The people in charge have been named. The Board of Peace will meet in Washington next week. But there are wide gaps over the next steps, including Hamas disarmament and Israeli withdrawal, as well as questions over the Board of Peace's legitimacy and whether this is indeed the right path forward. Foreign Minister, I'd like to begin with you. The U.S. has presented this glossy and this modern vision of Gaza, but there are some harsh realities on the ground. Some 1 million people in need of shelter, dependent on aid. You endorsed Trump's plan. Are you satisfied with the timetable and the progress so far?
I think it's not just about the plan itself. Who would say no to a peace plan? What we need to see is a time frame that would take us throughout the steps of the plan, including the realities today in Gaza. Today in Gaza, the reality is that there's only a partial ceasefire. Humanitarian assistance is not entering in the extent that is needed, and there's a lot that needs to be done in Gaza. Gaza is not separable from the West Bank. The reality is Gaza is part and parcel of the occupied Palestinian territory, and as such we need to look at it as an integral part. The most important issue is the security issue. We need to look at the security with an objective eye and ask ourselves, whose security are we trying to prioritize and whose security we are trying to normalize? For us Palestinians, the pathway is very clear. It's part and parcel of the occupied territory, and as such, we need to be engaged as soon as possible.
And I'd like to get Mr. Mladenov that perspective from you, because, I mean, security and the disarmament of Hamas has been called the linchpin now going forward. This is really seen now as the first step to provide that security. Is Hamas going to give up its weapons, and how soon? And I'd also like to remember, you are the one who is now charged with making this plan work on the ground. You're the principal diplomat.
Well, thank you. I would say that we have to look at the plan as the only option of going ahead with anything that makes sense in Gaza and that stops this war and doesn't allow a return to violence. And the plan is quite clear. Gaza needs to be governed by a transitional authority, as authorized by the Security Council resolution, under which it needs to take on the full civilian and security control of Gaza, and that includes the disarmament of all factions in Gaza, not just Hamas. Hamas, Islamic Jihad, others, there are plenty of them who have weapons and tunnels and production facilities inside Gaza. That is the condition under which we can see Israeli forces withdraw from the current yellow line in order to be able to begin any reconstruction for the Gaza Strip.
We're hearing about a draft plan. There's been some reporting this week. We understand you are listed as part of this American-led team that is behind it. The details that we have learned is that it would require Hamas to surrender all weapons that are capable of striking Israel, but would allow them to keep some small arms temporarily. Can you confirm that first? And is it ready to send to Hamas?
Are you seriously asking me to respond to that question? I'm not going to respond to that question. We have different plans. We have different
What's your time frame for presenting it to them?
The table, but I think the reality is that all of this needs to move very fast, because let me be absolutely clear about the risks that we're facing here. The first risk is that we're not going to we're not going to implement the second phase of the ceasefire, but we're going to go to the second phase of the war. And that is a serious threat on the situation on the ground. And if Gaza returns back to war, there's no place for the Board of Peace, there's no place for any of us until we see what is left and pick up the rubble potentially at the end of it. But to me, the biggest risk right now is that we cement the reality that we have on the ground. And that reality is not just Gaza being divided from the West Bank under a legitimate Palestinian Authority, it's the division within Gaza itself, split into two zones. And I think we need to understand that if we don't quickly, with Hamas and with all other partners, move on the implementation of the plan, this reality will be cemented on the ground, and then it will be very difficult to do anything else except perhaps some humanitarian aid to people.
Let's talk about the pressure that's being exerted. Mr. Gargash, I'd like to turn to you because how difficult is it going to be for the Arab states on the Board of Peace to push Hamas to get this done? What's your assessment?
Let me say that I was talking to some friends from Gaza who live in the UAE, and I could see these different emotions in what they expect. I mean, first of all, they don't really trust the process, seeing what had happened to their family, seeing what had happened to their city and country, etc., etc. But I think they're also, and they know that I know Nikolai very well, so they try and get a sense of improvement in at least their, the sort of living conditions of their families right now. The thing that they talk about right now is, what about water? What about shelter? So what I'm really saying is we've got to address the immediate. And I think that is the essential part. Of course, the longer-term view of a two-state solution and how we get there, and the effect also of not taking more irreversible actions in the West Bank are all important. But I think right now, the main thing is to bring real improvements to conditions of safety, security, livelihood, and I think that's essential.
Very important issues, but I'd like to just take it to security for a little bit more specifically now, because Israeli withdrawal from Gaza in phases, it's linked to a number of security steps, and I'd like to ask you about one of the next ones, which includes having this international stabilization force. This is meant to be the long-term international security solution. The UAE hasn't completely ruled it out, or joining it. What would you need to convince the UAE, do you think, to join this force?
Well, I think we've come out and said that we will not join that. But I think there are many things that we will do. We will do more in terms of humanitarian. We will do more in terms of facilitation. We will use and leverage our relations also with Israel more and more in order for us to sort of let them see also the other perspective in these things. So I think it's not only one item, whether you do it or you don't do it. I think there are many things, and we need to do that.
Let me turn to the Spanish Foreign Minister. We're going to get to the structural problems that you have with this deal, but just very quickly, can you tell me, because Pedro Sanchez has said that Spain would be ready to send troops to Gaza for peacekeeping when the opportunity presents itself. What do you need to see in order to give you the confidence to send?
Certainly a clear mandate from the United Nations, and to see the Palestinian Authority at the center of the whole process. I think that we have steps that we have to do before. We need massive humanitarian assistance to be able to go into all the land crosses to Gaza. We need to see this to be also a Palestinian-led process, and therefore the Palestinian Authority, that is our partner for peace on the Palestinian camp, to be involved, and then a clear mandate to that. And of course, Spain is ready to participate, including with troops.
Let's talk a little bit more about that. I alluded to this earlier. You're among the European allies who have been critical of the whole setup of Trump's Board of Peace, which is charged, of course, with overseeing the Gaza peace plan. You explicitly, in fact, declined the invitation. One of the reasons cited was concern it undermines the UN system. Another was that it does not include Palestinian representation, which you've just mentioned there. But there's no alternative to this. I mean, we just heard from the High Representative. What's the alternative? And where does this leave Europe now? Are you out of it?
We commend President Trump for peace. But at the same time, we have to make sure that we all give the same content to the word peace. A war peace starts for building from a ceasefire that is continuously violating to a real peace by this massive humanitarian assistance going in, from seeing the Palestinian Authority at the heart, and Europe must be at the center. We have been a partner for everyone in the Middle East since many years ago. We are financing the Palestinian Authority since many years ago. We have our southern neighborhood in the Mediterranean completely affected by the situation. So We have been engaged, we must remain engaged, and we are a good partner for the peace.
Okay, Senator Murphy, I'd like to turn to you. Some elements of your Democratic Party were alienated by Biden's approach to Gaza. They wanted more pressure put on the Israeli government's military campaign on humanitarian grounds. You have spoken, indeed, about that. Under Trump, there's now a ceasefire and a framework for the future. What do you see Democrats now within this structure being able to do to help push Gaza on a path toward peace, reconciliation, reconstruction?
Well, is there a ceasefire? Hundreds of Gazans have been killed since the announcement. Israel still reserves the right and, in fact, is potentially making plans to go back in with a new significant deadly ground invasion. Our critique has been that the president, I think, has been engineering for press releases and banners, not actual substance. There is an alternative to the rushed Board of Peace, which excludes some of our most important allies. The reason that it's very difficult to get our friends in Europe to sign up for a project as essential as this is because our president has engaged in a consistent campaign to alienate our friends in Europe. There was an alternative to stay closer to Europe so that when we needed them at a moment like this, they were there for us. The question is the president going to use leverage that he has over the Israeli government to make sure that the very difficult decisions to open up avenues for reconstruction and humanitarian relief, to put the next step of Palestinian input into the governance authority in place? Is he going to use that leverage? And right now, it seems as if he uses leverage to make announcements, to issue plans, to convene sort of partial boards of allies, but not using that leverage to actually bend the political will inside Israel to get us to the next phase.
Foreign Minister, I'd like to take it back to you. You were mentioning timetables earlier, in the realm of this deal. I'd like to ask you about your own timetables now, and the next steps on the Palestinian side. We've talked about Hamas disarming. The Palestinian Authority also needs to reform, which is something that you have been talking about for so long. When will you get to the point when you can take over Gaza's governance? Are you talking about time frames?
Yes, and we're ready because we've been thinking about the day after in Gaza for some time. We're not starting today. And we've had the plans. We've had plans that were endorsed by the Arab League, the Muslim world, and the international community at large. So what needs to happen is for the Palestinian government to be empowered, to be able to take its responsibilities. Today, the Palestinian government is marginalized, and you cannot continue marginalizing a government because whatever transpires in Gaza would be very much related to whatever happens on the West Bank. If you talk about a population registry, you need to go to the West Bank. If you talk about issuing passports, you need to go to the West Bank. So you might as well bring in the Palestinian Authority early on rather than in the middle of the process or at the end of the process.
Trust has been eroding among Palestinians amid all of this that you have described in the occupied West Bank, and trust in the Palestinian Authority. Political alienation is also on the rise. There's an increasing number of the population refusing to identify with any faction. Can you bring people together? I'd like to ask you, is it even possible on the short term?
Yes, it's possible, and we need to keep that hope alive.
Because the numbers are pretty stark when you look at the polling.
We need to keep the hope alive because we cannot go into desperation. The Palestinians need to see something moving on the political front. We are tired from being seen with a humanitarian lens. The humanitarian lens needs a political track. And if Palestinians start seeing a future at the end of the tunnel, then they will rally behind the leadership. But if this leadership is not being able to deliver, and it is the peace camp that is unable to deliver, then of course the leadership will be marginalized and its reputation going down.
I'd like to ask you a little bit more about governance, Mr. Mladenov, and I know you also wanted to talk about the International Stabilization Force. I saw you signaling for me earlier. Let's talk about the Palestinian National Committee for the Administration of Gaza. This is the technocratic body that's meant to move in, and they're currently operating out of Cairo. What needs to happen before they can operate in Gaza, and how much power will they have to decide the future of the Palestinian people, with all these layers of oversight and governance?
There are no layers of oversight and governance.
The Board of Peace?
The layers of support, guidance, and assistance to the committee. The committee is not the bottom layer of a system. It is the spearhead of what is required to actually give the people of Gaza a new hope, as you said, for the future. Now, for them to go into Gaza, a number of conditions need to be met, and we've already started working with them with all sides. One, Hamas needs to transfer the civilian control of the institutions in Gaza. And this is not an easy process. This requires a little bit more careful planning. It requires monitoring and verification for us to be able to make sure that this is done in a proper way. This is not a government coming in after an election. This is far much more complicated because Hamas has been governing Gaza for 20 years and changing Palestinian laws and implementing policies that are not in line with Palestinian legislation. Secondly, we need to make sure that what is happening now with the violations of the ceasefire stops. Because if you put the committee tomorrow in Gaza and the violations of the ceasefire continue the way they are now, we're only embarrassing the committee and ultimately making it ineffective. Thirdly, we need to see a radical increase in the assistance to people. Aid going into Gaza, materials that have been long needed, temporary housing, tents, caravans, medicine, food, everything that is required needs to change so people can quickly see some change, some basic change in their lives. There are a couple of other conditions as well. We need to make sure that the committee has the resources, of course, to be able to do this. And finally, we need to make sure that we have the framework agreed in place on the decommissioning of weapons in Gaza. And here comes my answer to the ISF question. The ISF question is the ISF is extremely important, the security force, but far more important than the ISF, far more important is the new Palestinian security force that should be deployed in Gaza, that should be able to secure the ground with the assistance of the ISF. Because if we are relying on international troops, no matter where they come from, to police Gaza, we have a very wrong approach to this. And this is not the approach that we have.
I have just a quick question for you now, and I just want to change gears for a second because I understand you'll be in Washington next week. The Board of Peace will be meeting. Trump is set to announce a multi-billion-dollar fund for Gaza. There are demands for this fund to be controlled by the UN, we're hearing from some diplomats. Who should control the cash?
They're different. First of all, it's not cash.
The money.
And secondly,
colloquially.
There are a number of instruments. There's a World Bank Trust Fund that is being created to manage assistance for Gaza. We're looking now at three priorities. Firstly is humanitarian aid, because that is what is immediately needed. Secondly is emergency recovery on the ground. And thirdly, security, because none of the ideas that are out there of how Gaza can be rebuilt in the future can even begin to materialize until Gaza is won, and right now it's not won, and you have the security problem related to the weapons there. So for the conditions to be in place for Gaza to be reconstructed, if you wish, and redeveloped in a way that is sustainable, one, we need to have the committee effectively governing. Two, we need to have the process of decommissioning of weapons, and three, we need Israeli withdrawal.
Would the UAE be satisfied by that answer, being
I think
having given money to the Palestinian people? And if not, what are the checks and balances that you're going to be looking for to try and convince you that the money will be stably invested for the benefit of the Palestinian people?
I think we're on board. I think, number one, on humanitarian support, in the last 2 years, we put about 45% to all aid going to Gaza. So we're committed. We are sending more and more aid there. But again, with the money, the more transparent the system is, I think the more comfortable the UAE, as I'm sure many other donors will be, as soon as we see that sort of transparency and the system of spending for Gaza is clear, I think.
There are so many details yet to be worked out. Foreign Minister, I'd like to turn to you because, I mean, Europe gives a lot of money to the Palestinians. What would you be looking for when it comes to how the money is structured, for example, for anti-corruption?
First of all, we want to make sure that Gaza remains being the land of the Gazatis, the Palestinians from Gaza, and that there is no division of the Gaza Strip. The second thing, all the money should go to strengthen the Palestinian institution. And if there are things working in the West Bank, let's not duplicate them. Let's try to involve what is being done successfully in the West Bank, and let's bring it to Gaza, because what's very important for us is reconstruction must be focused on the people of Gaza, the Palestinian of Gaza, and not losing sight of our final objective. And the final objective is to give a definitive peace and stability, and that means two-state solution and putting in place a Palestinian state. Everything that reinforces that goal, it's good for everyone, including the Israelis and its security. Everything that goes away from that will do nothing at the end.
Let's go back to the glossy future that has been presented for Gaza. We've all saw the pictures. We saw although not addressed in his presentation in Davos, the guarantees that there should be for Palestinians regarding property rights, compensation for those who lost homes, businesses, livelihoods, during the war. Have you gotten any clarity on that since?
I don't think there's the clarity that is needed, but the main issue that we need to put before us is we don't want to engineer a new Gaza. We want a Gaza that is for its people and for being part and parcel of the whole of Palestine. If we think of a new Gaza that is divorced from this reality, then we are going into something that is foreign to the terrain and foreign to the people.
Senator Murphy, I'd like to turn to you now. We can't ignore what is happening in the West Bank. The increasing settler violence. Now there's new legislation making it easier for Jewish settlers to buy land. We have successive governments in the United States which have failed to rein this in. And this is a major barrier to lasting peace. Why has there been that failure? Because the United States does have leverage, don't they?
You are watching in real time the erasure of a Palestinian state, and we don't any longer have years. We have days and weeks to interrupt what is happening in the West Bank. This is a critical moment, and the president has to use this leverage that I spoke of, not just to open up humanitarian corridors, not just to make sure that the next phase opened up, but the truth to the power to the Israeli government about how their actions in the West Bank are shattering a future Palestinian state. I just want to be honest about what's happening in the United States today with respect to U.S. public opinion. For the first time ever, the majority of Americans now, Republicans and Democrats, no longer support additional military aid to Israel. That number, if you are under 30 in the United States, is 16%. Now, that's heartbreaking as someone who has spent his entire life believing in and supporting the state of Israel. But what's happening in the West Bank to many Americans is just as relevant as what's happening in Gaza. And so if there is not a change in Israeli behavior in the West Bank, it will threaten the long-term ability of the United States to support its vital allies. So this is a very important moment for Israel to maintain support from the American people. And it's not just about what's happening in Gaza. The American people are watching what's happening with the expansion of the settlements, with the talk of annexation, and it is part of what is driving both the left and the right away from continued support for our ally, Israel.
Mr. Gargash, I'd like to turn to you next because, Arab states, they signed up for this plan under the assumption that it is indeed working toward a two-state solution. Do you feel that that is still in the cards? And what sort of timetable do you think should be expected? And will the UAE and others walk away if you feel that in this process it is not adequately addressed?
I'll echo what the Palestinian foreign minister said. You have to have a political horizon. You cannot just work on humanitarian issues without a clear political horizon. And I think this is the main understanding of the UAE and other Arab countries, I would say. You have to lead somewhere. I mean, right now we know we have to address the Gaza issue, and these are, many of them are issues, part are humanitarian, part are reconstruction, part is Hamas weaponry, part is Israeli occupation of Gaza. But again, as you deal with these things, if you don't really present a political horizon, you're just walking in circles, really. So you do need a political horizon.
I'd like to also ask you about not only the political horizon, but also the structures that are in place, because it has been highlighted here before that there are Arab countries on the Board of Peace, but no Palestinian representation there. How do you see the risk that Arabs on the board will need to speak for the Palestinians and not the Palestinians themselves?
Well, I think we have to work with the situation that we have right now. I mean, you have many Arab countries today that are represented, but I think a more, let's say, equal situation will be for the Palestinians to have their voice. And they have to have their voice not only on the Board of Peace, but everywhere, because this is, I think, they are one of the principles as much as the Israelis are. This is essential, in my opinion.
Do you have confidence that, Arab and other member states of the Board of Peace will stand up to Trump if progress on the two-state solution does not materialize?
We have confidence in the Arab world, and the Arab world is our backbone. But we need to be around the table, because enough of people talking about us, implementing for us, planning for us without us. It's about time that we speak for ourselves.
Where do you think Gaza will be 1 year from now?
I hope it will be governed by the transitional administration of the committee. I hope we will be able to do that in cooperation with the Palestinian Authority, because that is critically important, as the minister said. I hope that we will be significantly advanced on deploying a new security force of Palestinians inside Gaza, and Hamas would have given up a significant part of its weapons, so that we are moving forward to the point at which Israel can withdraw from the yellow line. These are conditions that I think are critical if we are ever to return back to the political resolution of the Palestinian question, because the political resolution of the Palestinian question requires negotiations. It requires one Palestinian leadership over the entire occupied territory, and it requires a dialogue that is facilitated, not overseen, but facilitated by the United States, Europe, and others, as that it has been in the past. But to be able to do that, we need to see what is written in the resolution materialize. And the resolution is not just about Gaza. The resolution includes the requirement for the Palestinian Authority to undertake significant reforms, and for Gaza, at the end of the transition period, to be handed back to the Palestinian Authority and return to the political questions. This is the framing of the resolution, and this is, I think, on what we all agree.
We have time for just some quick remarks before opening it up to the floor. Foreign Minister, how do you see Spain's role, just briefly, in helping with reconstruction?
We are going to continue in the path that we are supporting the Palestinian Authority. We do it financially. This year we have given 50 million to the Palestinian Authority. We are ready to help with the reconstruction, and we are ready to help with a genuine peace. But once again, we have to make sure that we all give the same content to the word peace. That means a Palestinian-led process. Gaza is for the Gazati people and for no one else, and we give them the living condition for that. Under those conditions, we are ready to be there.
Senator Murphy, you mentioned fatigue over this issue in the United States. You have midterms, you have other issues coming up, there are other hotspots in the world. How do you see keeping the focus and keeping the public focused on this in the U.S.?
Well, I think it's incredibly important that we see real progress in the short term. You obviously have an enormously difficult job, but the humanitarian situation continues to be morally unacceptable. And so once again, I really worry about the long-term health of the U.S.-Israel relationship if we don't see real meaningful progress in the clearing of rubble, in the delivery of humanitarian and medical aid, the construction of actual real permanent shelters in which people can live. This is going to be critical for the United States to continue to build support for the ultimate very expensive reconstruction project. I think the other quick thing to mention is that it's got to be done in a transparent way, right? We have watched our president hand projects to cronies and to friends to waste and abuse taxpayer dollars. If there's going to be a request that the Congress put forward substantial money into Gaza, it's going to have to be administered through a forum in which we know there are not favors being doled out to the president's friends.
Mr. Gargash, I'd like to ask you, how hopeful are you with all the moving parts that you're seeing that this will become a region of peace?
We always have to be hopeful. I think that is the...
What's the state of your personal hope right now?
That's the cornerstone, I think, of working as a diplomat, is to be hopeful. I mean, the challenges are many, but I think bringing relief to people who are suffering, trying to find political solutions, being able to help in issues like these are what keeps us going. I mean, this is going to remain being a very difficult region. I think the Palestinian issue is also at core. So addressing that Palestinian issue does not mean that you resolve all of the region's issues, but it's very central and very important to do that. I think we have to be very hopeful and continue, although it's sometimes very difficult, to be honest.
What is your level of confidence that this is the plan that works? Or are we here again in another 10, 20 years still talking about lasting peace?
I hope we are not here next year talking about peace, but it needs a lot of teeth and a lot of work. The Palestinian leadership's message is constant on the viability of a state that lives in peace and security with its neighbors, and we all need to work towards that end.
Okay. Thank you so much to all of our panelists. We're going to open it up now to the floor. We have a first comment coming from the former foreign minister of the State of Israel, Tzipi Livni, and perhaps some food for thought, to get your response to what we've heard about plans for Gaza's future, how you see Israel's security concerns being addressed, and perhaps you can also address the fears among some that Israel may be preparing to resume full-scale military operations in the territory.
Thank you. I believe that there is an opportunity here, an opportunity that can turn into a danger to both Israeli and Palestinians. And the only way to continue and to create a better future for both is by stop thinking in terms of supporting the Palestinians or Israel. There's a win-win situation or win-win way of thinking. And therefore, those of you just speaking, not just speaking about the situation in Gaza without taking care of Israel's security, this will lead to a situation, to a danger, to the Palestinians in Gaza as well for Israelis. The only way to move forward is also by having a joint understanding and action plan of the moderates or the pragmatics in the region against the extremists. And it's clear, especially after October 7th, that Hamas cannot stay in power, that it should be demilitarized, and Gaza should be demilitarized, by the way, as was agreed also in the past when we negotiated peace with the Palestinians. There is no hope for peace with them. They do not represent any national cause of the Palestinians because they represent this religious jihadist ideology. And we should learn from past experience. Israel quit Gaza Strip in 2005. Israel dismantled all the settlements in Gaza. Israel hoped that the Palestinian Authority will take over, but Hamas took over. And the Palestinian Authority didn't have enough power to replace Hamas. And I believe that part of the responsibility of the pragmatics is to strengthen the Palestinian Authority against Hamas. And therefore, we cannot afford another situation where Hamas is taking over or reaching an agreement that they will be part of a future government in Gaza. Because when they took over in 2006, the entire international community agreed that if a Palestinian government wants to be legitimate, they need to accept the Oslo Agreement and to renounce violence and terrorism. And this is more than true, especially after October 7th today. So, yes, it's not just about Gaza. And I do not represent here the Israeli government, but I do represent here the Israelis who want to live in peace with the Palestinians, that are not thinking about expansion of settlements or building new settlements in Gaza. But I'm also the one that negotiated peace in the future. And unfortunately, Abu Mazen was not willing or didn't have the courage to say yes to a plan. I'm not entering into a blame game. Trust me, this is not the reason that I'm mentioning this. But we need to learn from past experience. And the price that all of us paid during all these years is too high not to learn from past experience.
I think that there will be a response to that from the panel, and I would like to integrate it also with the first question from the audience. So I would encourage people to raise their hands so I can get a sense of who might have questions in the room, and we'll begin right here.
Thank you very much for an interesting panel. My name is Kat Piri, a member of parliament in the Netherlands. I have a question. No one mentioned the word accountability or justice. So I wonder, when will there be justice for the crimes that have been committed? I think all the perpetrators of 7th of October mostly are killed. What about the perpetrators of the genocide? Thank you.
Mr. Mladenov, would you like to take that one?
Look, my focus now really is entirely centered on how we can make sure that the tragedy that Gaza does not continue a day longer than it has until now. And I'm sorry to say, but Munich is very far from the reality of what people are living with in Gaza right now. And that's why I want to get back to what I said in the beginning. Our focus needs to be on making sure that the people of Gaza receive the aid that they require right now, that we put in transparent, accountable indeed, institutions of governance in Gaza that they have not had for 20 years, and that we make sure that there are no weapons beyond the control of the transitional authority in Gaza. Because if we continue this, if anyone in this panel or in this room believes that we can move forward or anyone gains...
When does the accountability part, though, come in? I think that was the question. When does it come in?
By Hamas staying in control of Gaza, please let me know.
Yeah.
Please let me know. That is my focus now. All the questions related to the political process, to what happened on October 7th, to what led to October 7th, to what happened after October 7th, right now are not in my remit. And that is why I want to stay within what I need to focus on, because we're dealing with human lives right now. We're really dealing with human lives, and we need to understand this. And again, if anyone in this panel or in this room believes that there is a future for Israelis and Palestinians, with Hamas and government in Gaza, with their weapons under their control, please let me know.
And there was a question right here in the front, and then, we'll ask two questions.
Thank you very much. I'm the Assistant Secretary General of the Arab League. I'm very encouraged by the panel and what was said about the way forward in Gaza, but I think most of us would agree that Gaza in itself is not the issue. The issue is the political horizon for the whole Palestinian question. I heard, for instance, what Minister Livni said, and I know this is shared in wide circles in Israel, but they also have to ask themselves why we reached this stage. The ruling coalition in Israel right now has succeeded effectively in taking us back to prior Madrid, before 91. That is very significant. So we need to, you need me to ask a question, right? I didn't have a question. I had a comment, and I think it is warranted. So my question, my comment really is at the end. I would say, let us focus, led by the United States, because I still believe, I'm among many who still believe that it is the United States power that would be needed in order to bring things forward. Let us all gather in terms of finding this political horizon. We cannot wait until the little stories, the little problems, little for us, but very, very huge for the Palestinians in Gaza, are settled before the political horizon is reached.
We have a lot of hands.
Thank you.
There's here, Mr. Barghouti.
Yeah, thank you. I want to agree with Senator Murphy that about the urgency of the moment. I feel sometimes we are living in a bubble of illusion. While we are talking, the Israeli government has declared that the whole West Bank is available for settlements, and they practically nailed the last nail in the coffin of Oslo Agreement in front of the whole world. And it is the Prime Minister of Israel who declared that Israel will be from the river to the sea, including Gaza. And it is the Israeli finance minister who declared that they will come back to Gaza and resettle there, and Palestinians should be ethnically cleansed. In this situation, it's not just about the accountability for genocide, which is a very good question. Also, who's going to pressure Israel to stop the process of killing the very last option of two-state solution?
Is there someone to whom you'd like to direct that question? Perhaps Chris Murphy?
Well, listen, I mean, our own intelligence agencies tell us that the net result of Israel's military activity in Gaza has been essentially meaningless with respect to the eradication of Hamas fighters. Essentially, just as many have joined as have been killed. And it is a reminder that we can have this conversation every decade about the reconstruction of Gaza after a major military activity from Israel, or we can make a decision to prioritize a future in which the Palestinians have a home of their own. And so this has to be a centerpiece of American policy. I will agree that we need to lead. This administration has not led, but we cannot give up. But I think the administration needs to understand that time is of the essence.
I'm going to turn around because I haven't been able to see behind me if there were any questions or any hands. And if not, I did see a question right here. Yeah. And please do ask a question if you would.
Yeah, it is a question.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm the director of the Carnegie Middle East Center in Beirut. Nikolai, for you, it's called the Board of Peace. So while I applaud the focus on, the immediate humanitarian, addressing the disastrous conditions, I think maybe this needs to be part of a larger political horizon. At least taking that into account. It's not enough to say the here and now, and the urgency of the moment, I think Mustafa and many of the speakers have already referred to. So my question to all of you is, what can be done? What are you willing to do? What leverage are you willing to use to start building the blocks for something really that is called peace?
I think I'd have to give that to you again.
I fully agree. I fully agree with you. What I'm saying is that there are two ways of looking at it. Can we fix the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and end up with a two-state solution if we're looking at the politics at the top without looking at what's happening on the ground? Or do we need to fix the situation on the ground in order to enable the conclusion of what needs to happen at the top? And right now, we have such a disastrous situation in Gaza, such a disastrous situation, that if we allow collectively it to be cemented under the current conditions, in which it is not just Gaza being divided from the West Bank, it is Gaza itself being divided into two parts. If we cement that division, please tell me how we get from that to a two-state solution, because I can't see the pathway. And that is why we need to make sure that, one, Gaza is, we often talk about having one governance, one legal system, and one system of controlling weapons in Gaza. And I always add to that, we need one Gaza for that. And that is why we need to start with, making sure that Hamas is out of the governance, that there's a transitional civilian authority in place in order to be able to normalize the situation on the ground, in order to have what is really required, as you said, a political solution to the conflict. But under the current conditions, with Hamas still in Gaza and Gaza divided into two, we're setting ourselves up for complete and utter failure if we don't address that. And that failure will be, the price of that failure will be paid both by Palestinians and Israelis down the line.
And with those words, we conclude our panel, Life Under Destruction, Building Blocks for a New Gaza. Thank you so much to all of you, and thank you so much to the audience.